Hey, it's the Bet Las Vegas and Audacy Sports, and I just said before I hit record on this interview that this is the least prepared I've ever been for one, but rightfully so. It's NFL free agency. How can I be prepared? I'm getting ready to talk to Jimmy G with Scott Gulbransen, and then Darren Waller gets traded. And then I remember we talked about this in December. We were one of the first, and here we are in the middle of all the chaos. Of course, from Silver and Black Today, the Audacy original podcast, one of the best NFL podcasts that we have here at Audacy. Scott joins us. It's been a minute. How have you been, my friend?
Good, man. It's just that time of the year where emotions run high and fans, if their teams don't sign every free agent available, they feel their team's going to go 0-17 and they want to fire everybody. But other than that, no, not much else going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess we'll start off with the news of the day, which is the man who, for about 2 years, has been the homecoming king of Las Vegas, along with his now wife, Kelsey Plum, who is the homecoming queen, no longer the king of Las Vegas, possibly New York. Like I said, we did talk about Darren Waller. I started noticing that he really wasn't getting much playing time, even when he was able to be on the field. And obviously, there's just been a lot of turmoil since the moment he signed that extension. You were critical of the extension from the front office standpoint. Now that we know he's getting traded to New York, Giants sending us a third round pick. What do you make of it?
Well, as you remember that conversation we had, I think it was right before New Year's Eve, saying that I thought they should trade him as soon as they possibly can. And so not surprised by it. And again, Darren Waller, his life story, what he's been able to do, we all cheer for the guy because as a human being, just a remarkable story, a remarkable talent. But at the end of the day, he was unable to stay on the football field. And then, of course, you had what some believe, never confirmed, but what some believe as sort of a holdout, meaning that he said he was injured to start the last season and came along very slowly. We heard grumblings, as you and I talked about back in the fall, that his teammates maybe were getting lost because they felt like his commitment to come back wasn't as committed as they wanted him to be. So the Raiders had really, I think, in this case, no choice. They clear $11 million in cap space, and they get rid of a guy who has undeniable talent when he's healthy and playing at 100%, is one of the best tight ends in the game. The problem is he missed 15 out of 32 games. And so you look at his age, you look at where he's at, and it was a no-brainer if they could get a good draft pick, and they got a third. And some people are criticizing that. But for a guy coming off those injuries, not a bad take. But I do go back to, and I want to allude to something you said in the intro, Adrian, which is this was a bad deal for the Raider front office to go to last year. To give him the extension when he had 2 years left on his contract was a bad deal to begin with. Did that come from Mark Davis or was that Dave Ziegler? We don't know, but either way, they extended Carr, they extended Waller, and now they're both gone, and all they have to show for it is some cap space and a third round draft pick.
And to be specific with that cap space, like you said, they clear $11 million. They incur just about half a mil or 600K in dead money moving on from Waller. But as it stands now, for all intents and purposes, so 27 mil in active cap space that they have to play with. One thing I do want to touch base on, not only giving out the extension, I am seeing some people go, well, if you do believe that the Packers reached out and tried to trade him and get a second round pick, are you critical about that? That, hey, if you were going to move him, which seems like the writing was on the wall for a long time, if you were paying attention to some certain things, are you critical on them for doing it now as opposed to back then?
Well, certainly back in November when they had the opportunity to do it, should they have done it? Yes, clearly, because obviously their trust in him was shaken, and they weren't sure about his commitment to the Raiders. And so, yeah, I mean, listen, you have an opportunity to do it, should have done it. But at the end of the day, they held on to him. I guess they held out some hope. We won't know until we hear Dave Ziegler or Josh McDaniels talk about it. Josh McDaniels just a couple of weeks ago said Waller played into their long-term plans. A lot of people are criticizing for saying that. Listen, anything a coach or GM says this time of the year, you can't take at face value.
Yep.
It's a business, and they're posturing to increase the value of the player. So I don't fault them for that. But yeah, clearly they could have gotten more before. But then, of course, Waller continued to be injured, and his productivity wasn't what it was before.
And like I said, we gave you the cap space number around 27 mil. Now, with that third round pick from the Giants, Raiders have 12 picks in this year's draft. You got the, of course, number one first round pick is the seventh slot in the first round. You got a second round pick. You got 2/3, 1/4, 3/5, 2/6, and 2/7 to round out this draft. And I guess as this is being put together, and also need to point out, we did sign Jacoby Myers earlier this morning to give us another wide receiver. You know, there was rumors about Darren being traded. There was rumors that Hunter Renfrow was being shopped around. Do you feel that Hunter's going to be traded?
I think there's a good possibility that he could be, and I would see that happening perhaps as part of a deal to move up in the draft. Although, as my co-host Mo Moten rained on my parade, the Cardinals are pretty set at slot receiver. I thought that was a natural fit. I think the Raiders are working on something. I think that they may still want to move up in that first round, and they might have their eyes on one of the two top quarterbacks, and they're maybe making that move. Yes, they signed Jimmy G, but Jimmy G is not a sure thing. We all know the downside to him, which is availability, which is why they got rid of Darren Waller. So if you're the Raiders, this might point to, and this is where I keep telling fans, because a lot of fans are disappointed they haven't done anything in free agency to address defense overall, except for a couple minor signings. And my point to that is they're working on something. They're doing something. It's been 2 days into free agency, and Raiders fans want it all figured out. It's not going to be. I think they're playing a longer game here. I think they're trying to work up. As you saw, Adrian, the Raiders were talking to the Bears about that number one draft pick. They just couldn't keep up with what the Carolina Panthers were going to offer, and so they backed off. But that tells me that the Raiders might like one of those two top quarterbacks, and they might be packaging these picks. Getting that extra third round for Darren Waller is a big pick if you think about it, because if you're going to trade the 100th pick, and maybe the 38th pick in the second round up to move up in the draft to get one of those quarterbacks, that's a nice package for a team. So I would look at that. And with Hunter Renfrow, anything goes. They have some outs in the contract there, and it wouldn't be a big hit for them. So we'll see what they do. It sounds like they're ready to remake and be aggressive on trying some new options at the wide receiver position.
And as we talk about these picks, let's just dive in. Earlier this week, I had the chance to talk to Jordan Reed, NFL draft expert for ESPN, and I just flatly asked him, "Hey, do you feel like the Raiders should move into the top 5 specifically to get a quarterback?" And he said, yes, there are multiple quarterbacks that I would do that for when I look at the Raiders. For you, whether it's CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, some more refined games, obviously a lot of raw talent when you talk about Anthony Richardson. Would you, with having Jimmy G now on the roster, would you make the move to get inside the top 5 to get a quarterback now as opposed to waiting till next year?
So two things. One is if I'm Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels, and I think one of those guys is the guy, then yes. We don't know the answer to that question, because you could look at next year's draft and say, hey, the top two quarterbacks in next year's draft are better. But here's the point. Even if the Raiders are retooling, rebuilding, whatever you want to call it, there's no saying you're going to be in the top 5 to drop those guys next year either. Crazy things happen. You might say, well, this team's going to win 5 games. And then they go out and they happen to win 3 more, and suddenly they're at 8 wins, and they're at pick number 15, and they don't have a chance, and they don't have the draft capital to move up. So nothing is for certain in this world. And I think if you want one of those guys, and to me, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud is the guy that I think would be perfect for the Raiders. If
Agreed.
one of those guys is your guy, then yes, then you do it, right? Because that's what you need to do. You need to set yourself up, even with Jimmy Garoppolo, because Jimmy Garoppolo, basically you can get out of it after 2 years. You have guaranteed money for 2 years. You can actually get out of it 1, but at the same time, he gets the guaranteed money. So to me, I think that's what they're doing, and we'll see if they're able to do it. If they don't do it, then they can obviously start to draft, and I think they have to draft clearly because they haven't addressed it in free agency. They're going to have to build that defense with young players. It might mean some bruises and some bumps over the next year, but to me, that's the right way to do it. Build that roster with the combination of rookie deals, and then you fill in spots as you develop a team that's talented and can play defense on that side of the ball.
And the original point of me wanting you to come on the show this week was because of the Jimmy G move, excuse me. And I guess the one thing that kind of gives me hesitation is I'm worried that this move was made to save some face so that the bottom doesn't totally fall out. Because even with what we just talked about, if the Raiders are in a position where they're going to be 1, 2, or 3 in the draft, I don't think Mark Davis and I don't think this fan base is really prepared for what that means in terms of how upset they are that this team keeps losing when these tickets and all this stuff is so expensive. To me, it's not feasible. So bringing it back to Jimmy G, like when I look at the quarterbacks that are available, why not get Jacoby Brissett? Because you can get him for a little cheaper, and we can argue about who's better. But to be honest, they're in the same class. Jimmy G might be a little bit better. I mean, I don't know what they're doing with the direction of this team when you get Jimmy G in terms of trying to say we're trying to compete. I want them to do two things. You're either going for it or you're not, to get the pieces to be able to not stay in the middle.
Well, I think if you look at it from this perspective, Adrian, Jimmy Garoppolo knows that system better than Jacoby Brissett played in it a long time ago. He is not really recently. So I think if you look at that perspective, Jimmy G is a good fit there. He also has a very high command. You talk to anybody who's played with him privately or even anonymously, they all rave about it in the locker room. So I think if you're looking at a bridge guy, remember, when you look at this deal, Adrian, it's $11 million. That's a good deal, right? I mean, he's got the
Yeah,
guaranteed, but
true.
I'm saying when you look at the 11 million, all the rest of the compensation is based on him playing, meaning that if he gets hurt, he doesn't get the money, and the Raiders aren't out any more money. So I think the risk here is, yes, absolutely 100%. Is he a markedly better quarterback than Derek Carr? No, I don't think he is. I think they're about the same. The only difference is I think that he's been on better teams, no question about it, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Derek Carr stayed healthy. He had the longevity. He was able to play in games, but the money itself, you're saving $26 million a year by moving on to Jimmy G for a quarterback you could argue is maybe a slight step below Derek Carr. So that points to me that they want to go get a young quarterback, and they're going to have a bridge guy. The other option that you're talking about is, okay, so you sign somebody for $4 million a year, like a Andy Dalton or somebody, and then you're worse off. So what do? Do you decide you want to win 2 games a year, or do you want to try to win 7, 8 games and at least be in that position where your offense, look, the offense is pretty much built. I know they got rid of Darren Waller, and I know they're retooling there a little bit, but it's got a good core with Josh Jacobs and, of course, with Devontae Adams. So to me, the prudent move here was to find that middle ground. But now they got to address the future because Jimmy G is a 1 to 2 year deal. That's it. And so you have to have somebody in place to take over. And that tells me that they're going to do everything they can. Are they going to be able to do it? We don't know. That's going to be part of what they'll be evaluated on. But there looks like they want to try to move up and get one of these guys in the draft this year.
And just for those, if you can hop on Twitter right now to look at Josh Jacobs' Twitter account following the decision to trade Darren, pretty interesting. You know, Josh isn't one to hold back on how he feels about things when it comes to his tenure with the Raiders. And with all this being said, I guess now that we kind of have a little bit of a clearer picture, we got our quarterback handled. We'll see what they do in the draft. We know how much cap space we have. You know, we haven't really touched base on the defense. You've hinted at it. They need interior linemen. They need linemen in general.
Yeah.
They have no linebackers as Denzel Perryman is a free agent. You can never have enough safeties or corners in this division going up against Mahomes, Herbert, and everything. So with this 27 mil, if you could kind of give me your power rankings in terms of positions of need. Are you going O-line first? Are you going corners first? How's it playing out in your head?
All of it? No. I mean, listen,
I
you
mean,
look at
yeah,
what
but
they've been
yeah.
able to. The problem is, a lot of Raider fans wanted Javon Hargrave, of course, the free agent from the Eagles, who ends up in San Francisco of all places, who now
So
has like
did
the best
everyone else, by
defensive
the
line.
way.
Yes, everybody else did, but you're talking 24 million a year for his services, and with the Raiders and as many needs as they have, they could not pay that for a guy. They just couldn't do it. So you look at the situation here, and you're right. The Raiders don't have a linebacker. The Raiders haven't had a dominant linebacker in years. And not only that, you look at the center of the defense all the way around, from the middle of the line through the linebackers to back to safety. They need safeties, right? They need to figure it out in the draft. It's not a good safety class in the draft. It is at cornerback, so very deep. I think they're going to be able to do some good there. But I would like to see them make at least one nice signing in this free agency period. There's still some guys left at linebacker and at safety. Some of the guys that I really like Jesse Bates, signed with the Falcons. He's gone already. He went on day one. So I think the Raider fans would be much more comfortable if they made one significant signing on defense, if they're going to be able to. If not, then you're going all young on defense. And I think that's an okay approach, but you're still going to have holes. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Also, don't rule out a trade. There's other guys out there that might be available via trade that the Raiders might be looking into. So we'll have to see that.
There it is. Well, Scott, as always, thank you so much for joining us. If something happens and we trade for DeAndre Hopkins tomorrow, we're gonna have to bring you back on. But for now, we say farewell. But before you go, just let everybody know what's coming up on the podcast.
Yeah, so on Thursday we're going to have Brian Baldinger, who I know has been on your show before. Baldy's going to be on. Yes, he's part of the Audacy family here with us, and we're going to have him on to talk about the Raiders situation, not only with Jimmy G, but with the rest of their needs and what they're going to do. So we'll get his view on that, as well as our famous now Raider Nation mailbag that we do on Thursday. So join Mo and I on Thursday on the podcast. You can also catch the show on Sunday on the Bet Las Vegas as well. And you can follow us on Twitter at SNB Today. But we'll be going on. Just subscribe to the podcast wherever you get them.
Damn right. As always, Mr. LV Gully, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Adrian.